Hello, I'm going to get started. So for those who don't know me, my name's Julie McLellan. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Healthy Land and Water. And it's my honour actually to host this launch today of the 2025 report card for South East Queensland. So I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered here today, the Yagara and Turrbal people, and I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging. I also extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and to any First Nations in the room today. We recognise the deep and enduring connection First Nations peoples have to country, caring for land, waters, air and ecosystems for tens of thousands of years. This stewardship inspires our own efforts through the long-running report card program, which for 25 years has monitored, reported and guided action to protect the health of our waterways and the partnerships that make it possible. Today we celebrate this milestone with an esteemed group of leaders and experts, and it's great to be joined by councillors around the region. This includes Councillor Jim Madden, Ipswich Regional Council, Councillor Cheryl Steinhardt, Lockyer Valley Regional Council, Councillor Lisa Bradley, Logan City Council. I'd also like to do a quick shout out to Jim Sawley, one of the key stakeholders and supporters in the foundational years of this program. While I'd like to acknowledge every person and their contribution to the success of our world-renowned program, we are tight on agenda. I'll tell you why in a minute. So I'll touch on just a few of the big names in the room, for which I'm really grateful. The Honourable Andrew Powell, Minister for the Environment and Tourism and Minister for Science and Innovation from the Queensland Government. Councillor Tracy Davis, Brisbane City Councillor for the McDowall Ward and Civic Cabinet Chair for Environment, Parks and Sustainability. The Head of the Independent Science Panel, Professor Fran Sheldon, who will present this year's results. Fran is with Griffith University's Australian Rivers Institute and a member of the Wentworth Group of Concerned Scientists. Also from the Australian Rivers Institute is Professor Michelle Burford, who is a technical expert with in-depth knowledge on the very topical algal bloom issue we've been hearing about in the media recently in South Australia. And of course, to my own team of Healthy Land and Water and the team of DETSI, throughout the 25 years that the program has been running, their deep expertise and commitment is what makes this all possible. To mix things up, I'm going to go against the flow and start at the end of the river. So 25 years ago, an alliance of scientists, citizens and policymakers united around a shared concern that the bay and waterways of South East Queensland and the lifestyle they support were under threat. Their vision was to produce a report card on the region's waterways that could be repeated at regular intervals and to measure the state of South East Queensland's waterways and catchments in response to a landscape of changing pressures. The questions they pose remain just as critical today. What is causing algal blooms? What conditions are our waterways in? What can we do about it? And how will we know that what we do is working? It was the genius of one of the world's longest running, most comprehensive regional ecosystem health monitoring programs, that's a mouthful, and has since been the MV and the basis like systems around the world. The report card, now in its 25th year, so we're celebrating its 25th year, remains the public face of all of this effort that everyone contributes to, tracking pressures, threats, gains and priorities for the future. It continues to inform waterway management and inspire action here and around the region. It is the culmination of a massive effort aimed at allowing us to understand what is happening in our regional waterways, inspire action, guide management and track progress. Yeah. With political support and executive partnerships, the report card and its extensive data set has informed priority regional actions, including policy reform, major infrastructure solutions and significant investment in improving waterway health. Who better to set the scene than someone who has been in the environment hot seat for many years of this journey? Andrew Powell has been a long-term supporter of the report card and in directing investment through his department in areas of concern evidenced by science and data. Please welcome to the stage the Minister for the Environment and Tourism and Minister for Science and Innovation, the Honourable Andrew Powell. So I have two things for Andrew. One, he's missing the first ball of the Gabba cricket, so I have his own ball, so he can hold on to it. I was going to throw it, but I'm a really bad shot. And the second one, which is why we're here, is report card. So thank you.
Thank you.
Over to you, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Julie. It's great to be here with you and your team. To your chair, Stephen, who I understand is stuck in the Gabba traffic trying to get here. To Dr. Andrew O'Neill, great to have you here. And I also acknowledge Professor Fran Sheldon, who's the key instigator of the report card this year. Can I acknowledge my good friend and former colleague, Councillor Tracy Davis, representing Brisbane City Council today, and the various councillors in the room, including another former colleague in Jim Madden from Ipswich, and Jim Sawley, former mayor. Welcome, Stephen. Perfect timing. There are a couple of things I really love. I think a number of you know I studied a science degree out at the University of Queensland, and a key component of that science degree was riverine geomorphology. So I get pretty excited around things like this. But there's one other passion that I have, and it is cricket. And as the tourism minister, I'm the events guy. And there's a seat with my name on it over at the Gabba. So I apologise if I'm a little bit distracted and a little bit keen. Does anyone know if we got a first ball wicket like we did a couple of years ago? No, I'm getting a shake from over there. Give me updates as you go, that'd be great. But look, I gave Julie a hard enough time about her timing of this report card launch, so I won't go on. But happy birthday to you, 25 years, which is just outstanding. My wife Taryn and I actually returned to Queensland, having spent some time elsewhere in 2000 when you launched the report card. And it has become a focal point for all of us across southeast Queensland around the health of our waterways and what we need to be doing to ensure their health continues to improve. It has become the longest running monitoring program in the world, and thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of sampling, measuring, analysing, reporting on our these particular waterways. And instrumental from the start was the partnership, a partnership that began with my department in its earlier iterations, Healthy Land and Water, local government, universities, scientists, researchers, and importantly, the community as well. We've had to involve the community, and it's important we did and continue to do from the very start. So I congratulate you on your unwavering support for this fantastic initiative. There's no question that scientific data is important, but it's only useful if we actually use it to take action. And that's what various levels of government have done over that 25 years and will continue to do in partnership with Healthy Land and Water and a number of other bodies, but also that community. Let me just turn to the concept of a report card. Not everyone can get straight A's. Gee, it'd be nice if we had a report card that shows straight A's, but that's never going to be the case. But I remember from my childhood that if you didn't get a straight A, often your teacher would write, there's opportunity to improve. Now, there's two ways you can look at that. You can look at it as a negative, or you can look at it as a positive. You can focus on the word opportunity. And I think what the report card has always allowed us to do is to explore those opportunities. One of the opportunities has led to the establishment of the Resilient Rivers program and funding across the SEQ City deal, 3 levels of government all investing in work, particularly upstream, that is going to produce a benefit for the river systems across southeast Queensland and for the Moreton Bay. Fantastic opportunity. It has led to an opportunity to share this entire approach. Julie has mentioned that this isn't my first time in the environment role. I am a recycled environment minister. And last time round, we literally stole this concept and planted it up in the Gladstone Healthy Harbours Partnership. Subsequently got rolled in the Mackay-Whitsunday waterways. And we'll be looking at this report card and going, right, now we need to drill down and look at this catchment and this catchment and this catchment. And my team stand ready to work with you in doing that. Our waterways are pretty special places. As Queenslanders, we love water, whether that's a beach, a river. It's really crucial that we keep an eye on their health, and particularly in the lead up to 2032, the Olympic and Paralympic Games, when the eyes of the world are going to be on this city, this region, this state, that we continue to pull out all stops to help our waterways get a fighting chance. So thank you to Healthy Land and Water. Thank you for your 2025 report card. and I look forward to working with you in implementing what's needed to do to continue to ensure we have healthy waterways across this great region. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Minister. It's great to have you take centre stage. As you mentioned, it was foundational as a partner with the department when we started 25 years ago. Next to the stage, I'd like to welcome Councillor Tracy Davis. Councillor Davis, as I mentioned, is the Brisbane City Councillor for the McDowall ward and the Civic Cabinet Chair for Environment, Parks and Sustainability. And she's here today as the Lord Mayor's representative. So welcome, Councillor Davis.
Well, thank you, Julie. It's wonderful to be here with you today. And can I also acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders of all cultures. Can I acknowledge some people in the room also, particularly to my good friend Andrew Powell. We served together in the State Parliament a little while ago for me, but still nonetheless it was a wonderful time. He's an excellent person and an excellent minister, and I look forward to working with him. To my other council colleagues that are here today, good to see you. And of course, Professor Sheldon, thank you for the work that you've done. Professor Michelle Burford, Dr. Andrew O'Neill, and of course, thank you, Julie, for putting this all together with your team. I'm not a cricket person, but I do like presents. If there's chocolate in it, you will be my best, my best friend. But I hope we do very well at the cricket today. Well, I know what that means. I'm old enough to remember back in the day with Dennis Lilly and their cohort and my father. I'm getting off topic of healthy land and water here, but still, nonetheless, it's things, isn't it, in as you're growing up that you remember, and you referred to, you know, times with Taryn and what reminded you of Brisbane and about how important Brisbane is as a city, or our state is and how we value our waterways. But I remember just being a child, just watching the cricket with him and thinking how amazing they were and how old they were, like how old these people in their 20s were. But nonetheless, I'm sure that we'll do very well, particularly with that starter score. But as Andrew alluded to, you know, this is a report card that speaks to how our region is working, or how waterways are working within the region. It is a known fact that that the Brisbane River, where it stops here in Brisbane City, is at the bottom of the catchment. And when you're talking about how we are rated as a report card, A to E, we generally sit down in the E section. And it's not for the lack of work that we're doing and the investment that we are providing through resilient rivers so that work can happen in the upper catchment. But I like the E to be that we're enthusiastic, that we are encouraging, and that we're environmentally focused. And that's what we do in Brisbane City Council when it comes to our waterways. We have over 4,000 kilometres of waterways in the Brisbane City LGA, including the Brisbane River. And we do a lot of our own testing. We have nearly 50 points across our waterways where we take samples, primarily in those areas for recreational use. But that information that we get from that also assists us with the work that we're doing along our waterways, whether it's planting along the waterway or other measures to work to improve the quality of the catchments. We are invested in that. Some of the work that we're doing at the moment is around eDNA testing for platypus in our creeks. It's going extraordinarily well. We've actually just recently found that one group have bred. And so there are little ones coming, so we're quite excited about that. But of course, if they are thriving, then we know that the water quality is right, and we are doing work right across our creeks where we know that there are a possibility of having cohorts of platypus actually thriving, and we are increasing the investment that we're putting into that space so that we can ensure that these little elusive critters, can be healthy and happy in our waterways. I'd just like to congratulate Healthy Land and Water for 25 years of excellent provision of information to the community. It is important. We can draw a lot from what they provide through the report card. Brisbane City Council will always invest in our waterways. We are absolutely committed to protecting our waterways and making them more accessible for people, and also to make sure that the little critters that reside in there are doing as well as they possibly can. And it's not just about the waterways. We've undertaken a range of other projects. Some of you may have heard of Hanlon Park, where we took out a really old concrete drain and revegetated it. It's a fantastic opportunity. It connects to our creeks, but it also, of course, means that we are bringing wildlife back into that area. There are fish back in, there are birds coming back in, so the wildlife's certainly starting to expand. So thank you again. I appreciate all the work that you do in the area. I know there are people in here that are committed to our waterway health and the environment, and the work that you provide certainly assists us as policy setters in planning ahead and making sure that we are doing the right sorts of things to keep our waterways safe and, of course, very, very healthy. So congratulations. 25 years is a wonderful milestone, and we look forward to another 25 years of working hard on the ground to make sure that we are making a difference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. BCC as well was a foundational partner, of Healthy Land and Water 25 years ago, and it was actually the coming together of the two heavyweights at the time, which was the state and the city, that came together and actually said, we have a problem, we need to figure out what it is. So having them both here today is really acknowledging the great work that you've contributed to. We just deliver it, but it definitely had significant political support, which is really what drove it. Okay. He went very subtly. Nobody knows he's left the room. Okay. So, look, I really do appreciate the Minister coming in today, because I know it was... I tried to offer him some other solutions, but he says, no, I've committed, therefore I'll be here. So it was really great for him to come. So next to the stage is Professor Fran Sheldon. Fran and I actually go back way when our kids were in daycare, but that's another story. Fran is the head of the Independent Science and Collaboration Committee behind the report card. We've been fortunate to have such an impressive expert on all things environment. Fran is a highly esteemed professor with Griffith University's Australian Rivers Institute and the head of the Environment and Science School of Griffith. Her active work with the Wentworth Group for Concerned Scientists is nothing short of impressive. And she's also, as I said, she's part of the Wentworth Group for Concerned Scientists, and it has an extensive research portfolio between relationships between hydrology, physical geomorphology and ecology in river systems, which includes the Murray-Darling Basin, which is no mean feat. So it's my honour to welcome Professor Fran Sheldon to officially launch this year's report card. Thank you, Fran.
Thanks, Julie. I think I get to control my own slides, which is quite exciting. So this year I had the pleasure, I guess it was a pleasure, of chairing the report card meeting that was sort of like the final culmination in a lot of work that had been done over the last 12 months to come up with this year's condition scores for across the catchments. So the report card, it's 18 catchments, 5 bay zones that I'm going to sort of walk you through. I can't quite see the slides, so we'll wing it. So EH&MP, as Julie has said, brings together a whole heap of different people. There's stakeholders, all of the councils, there's university representatives that sit on the various committees, there's healthy land and water scientists, and as well as some of the utilities, and everybody comes together to try and understand what's happening to the waterways across the region every year. Now, this is important this year because it's 25 years. So we're doing a bit of a retrospective, I guess, and looking at where we are after 25 years, and we can put lots of data together and think about what that means going forward. And on Julie's slide, she had 2032, you know, the Olympics, and I think we might have started to try and give up on saying the river would be blue by 2032, but you never know. So the report card isn't just, you know, one piece of information that comes together. There's indices, there's a lot of information that comes up through. And so the summary statistics that we give you, or the summary measures that you'll see, are just sort of like the pinnacle. Underneath that, there's a large volume of work and a hugely complex data set that can be used by a range of different people. So I've been involved with the report card since 2002, and various projects along the way, we've mined this data set to help us understand from a research context so much more about what's happening across the region. So rather than just sitting back and looking at the A's to E's, we actually have gone back and looked at lots of that data. So Healthy Land and Water is a great resource for the region and a great resource for understanding how, you know, river systems in pretty much urbanising, very intense catchments are actually working. So one of the things with every year's report card that you have to think of is the context of where it actually sits. So there's sort of, the way I see the region, there's sort of two scales. The report card was developed and built on trying to understand the impact of land use change on the waterways. So that's the big spatial scale. That's the regional sort of picture of urbanisation, agriculture, land use change, forest clearing, regeneration, a whole heap of different things happening across the big spatial scale. And that's big time scales that those changes occur. But then sitting on top of that, every year we have this sort of temporal context. What happened with rainfall? Rainfall really drives patterns in river systems. And so if we have a really dry year, we'll see particular results. And if we have a really wet year, we see particular kinds of patterns emerging. So 2025 was a year of, it was hot. We already know how hot it was. It was humid, but it also had the big rainfall event of Cyclone Alfred. But it also had consistent rainfall over the year. It was actually quite a wet year. So in the context of that and thinking, when I walk through the different regions and the different scores across the regions, just remembering that it was a wet year, but it wasn't wet every year. So sometimes we look at the wet and we see the whole of the southeast Queensland regions being dumped with rainfall. Alfred stuck pretty much along the coast, and the way the cyclone swung, it was a big impact on the southern catchments and the southern part of the bay. The north was wet, but you get a dry gradient as you go west. So the west had consistent rainfall, but it wasn't the big rainfall event. Say we had in 2011, where a lot of rainfall was in the western catchment. This year it's sort of hung a lot to the coast. So spatially quite variable, and I think that's the important thing to remember as we go through. So we'll concentrate, and the way I did this was to start not from the bottom and go back, but to start in those western catchments. And then we'll walk our way through to the bay and think about what that actually means for the system going forward. So if you look at the last, so we've got 10 years of data, and don't worry too much about the numbers, they're colour-coded. Red means it's not so good, green and, you know, amber's in the middle, and green means good. So just sort of look at the patterns, and we've put it up as a trend so we can get that context. So if you look across the region in 25, you know, pretty much, I think that slide says, freshwater ecosystem health, it's pretty green. So, you know, different shades of green. It's not actually looking too bad compared to some of the years prior. And you can pick up some of those dry years, like 2017 was quite a dry year, and you can see some of the reds coming out there. So we know that freshwaters tend to respond positively to rainfall to some degree, the rivers and streams, and negatively to when it's really dry. So this year, the score, the overall scores were fairly driven by macroinvertebrates. I don't have a pointer, but you can see the red dots and where things were. So the higher they are on that graph means the more healthy they were. So you can see that quite a few of the indicators that go to make up the score were on the sort of high bar this year. So starting in the western catchments, and we'll think about what that looks like. Oh, thanks, Susie. It's sort of hard to work out where I was up to. All right, we'll think about what the score looks like over that 25 years, moving through, starting out the west. So our western catchments tend to be really variable. So if you're looking at it as an overall trend, you know, there's a few, like the mid-Brisbane there in the light blue, bumps around everywhere, but we don't have many sites. But overall, the western catchments are quite variable. The 2025 data is no worse or better than many of the years, and if you took an average of that, it's sitting pretty much the same. So it wasn't a particularly good year, but it wasn't a particularly bad year. Interestingly, if you compare 25 to 22, remembering the big rainfall event in 2022, it was a very wet year. The western catchments were quite poor. If we go north and have a look at what happened, remembering that the northern catchments this year didn't have the massive rainfall dump as the southern catchments, but there was considerable rainfall. So when we do the estuarine and freshwater scores, they're very connected to the land use and to things running off the land use. So the scores have dropped in 25, and so they're lower than they were last year in 24. And they're similar to what they were in 22, again, when we had that big rainfall dump. And if you go back 25 years, 2011 was really poor as well. So you can sort of see this very rainfall responsive decline. Central catchments, it's really the same. So again, poor in 22, poor again in 25, and following this really, when we get these really event-driven big rainfall events, the scores in the freshwater and the estuaries really respond badly. Southern was even worse. And again, remembering we had that massive rainfall in the southern catchments connecting through to the estuaries, and so there was quite poor scores. And you can see the very poor score in the Logan. Again, loads of rainfall in that catchment. So quite land use connected down into the waterways, scores tend to drop off. So summary, I'm not going to read that, but overall, you know, it wasn't, for the freshwater systems, it wasn't too bad. When you add the estuaries in, you start to see the scores dropping off. Macroinvertebrates in the rivers and streams were pretty good. Fish were pretty good, although we're starting to pick up an impact of some of the barriers in the rivers and streams, which is having an impact on how the fish are responding. And, you know, wrapping it all up is pretty much the importance of trying to maintain some kind of natural connectivity in the system, but also protecting the rivers and streams from poor land use. And we'll talk about that as a trend towards the end. So how does that all work when you get down to Moreton Bay? So as Julie said, the whole program started because people started to go, hang on, Moreton Bay is quite at risk of all of this land use and urbanisation dumping nutrients into the bay and potential algal blooms. So what's Moreton Bay looking like? And it is actually quite concerning. So Moreton Bay from 2015 tracked along okay, and I think everybody, again, we didn't have big rainfall dump events in that period, but you can see what happens to the bay when you have a big rainfall event and all those freshwater systems are connected through the estuaries and you get this big surge of sediment and nutrients into the bay. So 22 was a drop, bounced back a bit in 23, 25, it has really collapsed again. And so we've got this declining trend, again linked to those really event-driven rainfall events. So this is just, again, a little colour-coded graph, and you can see the bay down the bottom, and you can see that decline since 22 in bay scores, again showing that connected pattern back into the catchments. And the roundup of all of the bays, again, declining scores since 22. So summary, there's been water quality decline in the bay, there's reduced seagrass habitat with sediment and increased amount of sediment coming out from the rivers and streams and estuaries. So how can we what's the story around, I guess, 25 years of data now in the context of the 25 report card? So one of the things, the three things that sort of are linked are riparian zones in the catchment. They're our front line of defence of sediment and nutrients coming off land. And so the loss of riparian zones means that we don't have that first line of defence. Sediment and nutrients are washing quite clearly into the rivers and streams and then connecting down through those estuaries into the bay. Combine that with the urbanisation around many of these catchments increases your nitrogen pollution into the urban estuaries, just from connecting to urban land use. And then the bay is again under algal bloom risks. And Julie mentioned the South Australia case, and you think about, they don't have 25 years of data to try and understand what might be causing some of their risks. So Riparian condition is, one of our key, first lines of defence up into the catchment. And these are the riparian condition scores for all of the catchments in 2025. And you see lots of reds and oranges and yellows and very few greens. So our riparian zones are actually not in good condition. They're not really protecting our streams and rivers from runoff. So what that means is catchment-derived sediment is still a big impact both on the estuaries and on the bay because it's not being captured within the catchment by vegetation. And so that when you get massive rainfall events, it can mobilise a lot of this sediment and dump it down into estuaries and bays where it can release nutrients and create problems. We are seeing some positives across the region. So riparian rehabilitation is being taken up. And so there are areas where the riparian zone's being rehabilitated, replanted. Some of the work that was done in the early part of the EHNP program suggests that there is a lag time. You get the trees there, but it does take quite a while for the complexity of that vegetation to start really being able to trap sediment and nutrients. So it's not like the minute you put it there, it's functioning. There is a lag time. So the longer we leave major regeneration of riparian zones, the longer it is before we start to see an effect back into the rivers. But the amount of regeneration is not greater than the amount of loss every year, and I think that's an important point. So riparian zone loss is higher than regeneration across the region. So we're not really making any headway. And again, some of the research that we've done collaboratively using the Healthy Land and Water data suggests that to really get a handle on some of this loss of sediment, we need about 80% vegetation cover, not across the whole of the region, that would be impossible, but riparian and up into those gullies where sediment is coming from. So we need riparian cover over most of our waterways. So algal bloom risks become increased when you get these big sediment loads and these big nutrient loads in the bay. And so, over the decades, we've seen these periods, and I think in the question time, Michelle's going to get asked about algal blooms, but we have seen periods where algal blooms have the risk of algal blooms has increased, and they do relate to these big event-driven times. And you can see from 22 to 25, we had massive rainfall, again, sediment leaking into the bay, but the increase in red and orange in 25 is chlorophyll, and that's a measure of algal biomass. So we're seeing this increase. And we need a good few dry years where we cut the freshwater systems basically off from the bay to see that reduce, because the nutrients would then get used and we may go back into a more green time. But the more frequent the events become, the less time the bay has to deal with the nutrients, and the risk will start to increase. So what can we do? Again, riparian zones are the thing that we just keep banging on about. Restoring riparian zones is one of our major, initiatives that could be undertaken to try and reduce that sediment. Reducing catchment pollution, restoring, concrete drains with wetlands is a really important thing to do in urban waterways and urban environments because, again, the wetlands offer a line of defence to nutrients coming off catchments. Reducing your nutrient input from stormwater, disconnecting a load of stormwater and allowing it to filter before it gets to the estuaries. All things we know what to do, but again, they're the things we have to start doing quickly if we want to continue to protect the bay. So 25 years, I think that the data set that we've got and the understanding we have now about that link between the freshwaters through the estuaries into the bay and the role of these really big event-driven weather systems on water quality declining in the bay is really quite useful. And what we now need to do is start thinking, as I said, if that starts to increase in frequency with climate change, how can we protect the bay if we start getting much more frequent, big event-driven systems? So thank you, Julie, for that, and hopefully that all made sense. Thank you.
Oh boy. Thank you, Fran. It's always so good to hear not only incredible scientists but great communicators. It's not uncommon. So not uncommon, but very special when you see it. So thank you.